But before we get to the pricing, let's talk about the stats of the actual hardware. So first off, there were rumors that this thing was going to be 120 hertz variable refresh rate screen, and it is. And when I saw that rumor, I was like, ain't no way Nintendo is going to go with a 120 hertz display. That's not happening, but it is happening. They actually did put in a variable refresh screen. It's also HDR for some reason, which is strange because it's not OLED, and I'm very interested to see how this thing actually looks once you get hands on it. But Russ, what do you think about it having a 120 hertz variable refresh rate panel? Like, that's huge.
It is interesting. I don't really care about the 120 hertz part. It's the VRR. And I feel like they just kind of have to go hand in hand. Like, you're not going to see a 60 hertz VRR, you know. And so my interest here is going to be like, you know, Nintendo has always been pushing, you know, getting the most out of the console at the lowest power profile. And so I'm going to put my carry hat on right now. But like, you know, like, so essentially the important part is the VRR, because once it kicks in, which is probably going to be around 48 hertz, you know, then we'll get that smooth gameplay all the way up to 120 hertz. And what I want to see is like games that are playing mostly 60 hertz, but they're 60 frames per second, but maybe they're going to dip every once in a while. Think about Tears of the Kingdom or whatever. Make that smooth, make that feel good. And so that's what I'm interested in, is the 48 to 60 and like getting that to feel comfortable and good with those AAA titles that have been ported over from like a PlayStation and Xbox, like to give you a handheld experience of those console games and to make it feel smooth. Like, that's the important part to me. 120 hertz will work with some games and whatnot, but I don't think many developers are going to target that on a handheld console that is so low powered. I just think it's not going to really happen. Even Metroid Prime 4 was like, 120 hertz, you know, 720p, like little text down below. You know what I mean?
Right.
Are we all going to play at 720p, or are we going to do like 1080p, make it look beautiful, 60 hertz? That sounds good.
It also has DLSS. So if you're running at 720p and you're playing on a 7.9 inch screen, am I remembering the number right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you're playing at 720p on a 7.9 inch screen using DLSS 2, it might look okay at 100, you know, at that resolution. Yeah. It won't look as good as 1080.
720p DLSS means it's going to subscale below 720p, so it might look a little chunky. 1080p DLSS will dip into 720p and whatnot. That will probably look a little bit better, and I assume that's probably even what they're going to be using in like Metroid Prime 4. You know, it's really interesting to see how it's going to actually unfold in the handheld state. You know, it's cool. It's going to be 120 hertz docked as well. You know, it's great. And they're going to have support for VRR if your display has it as well. So all those are great. But for me, it's all about that smooth gameplay as opposed to hitting 120 frames per second.
What do you think, Rich?
I think Russ nailed it. I think that's exactly what they're going for, right? Is smooth gameplay. I'm going to chastise all the people that like, and don't get me wrong, I think Nintendo will absolutely release an OLED, but I'm going to chastise the folks that are like, they should have done an OLED on this screen on the Switch 2. I just got done watching earlier today, the Mr. Who's the Boss video on the Switch 2, and he compared the Switch 2 LCD to the Switch 1 OLED panel, and it looks better, right? And that's the thing, right? Wow. Panels just look better over years, right? Like, there's years of like innovation and stuff like that. So the Switch in LCD, like I think you pointed out in your video, Bill, it can look great, like it does on the ROG Ally. The Steam Deck LCD is pretty good. There are some problems, but it's pretty good for a $400 PC, right? It's not bad.
Sure.
So, certainly Nintendo's going to trot out an OLED panel in a couple of years. But the fact that they brought VRR, great color, calibration, and it's a big screen, and it must be like landscape, right? Like Carrie must be going crazy about that one.
VRR. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
It doesn't matter if it's a landscape or not, because it's not a PC. So like, you're not running, like, that's a very important thing when you're talking about PC games, because it messes things up on some older games. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, yep. There's also like the way it refreshes, but you're right. Since VR, like, there's not going to be any tearing anyway. So
I feel like I feel like they were in a boardroom and they were like, okay, we can have OLED, we can have VRR. Which one are we going to do? And I think the right decision was VRR, because they're like, that's going to future proof, because then we're going to be able to use that technology when we get OLED. Because right now, OLED VRR is very expensive. I mean, like Asus has a couple laptops and it's like, they're $2,000, you know, like it's not an easy and fast technology. And then also, you know, they get the VRR. And then I think it's even smart that with an LCD, they said, you know what, HDR as well, because that means that developers are going to be apt to put in HDR support now. And then when they have the OLED and it really makes a big difference, then that's going to be the time where we can just all turn it on, because developers have been working on it for years. So I think they made the right moves based on technology that we got right now, pricing that we have right now, and, you know, the idea that they are going to upscale and upcharge us for an OLED model sometime in the future.
Yeah, I think you nailed it.